Welcome to the Kendo and Aido Italia podcast in this English language version. Enjoy listening.
You know, the Greek tragedian Euripides once said something like, nothing's really new, the old just becomes new when we look at it differently.
That's a great way to put it. It really applies to traditions, especially in martial arts, doesn't it?
It really does. And today, we're diving into Seitei Iai. That's the standardized sword drawing style from the Zen Nihon Kendo Renmei, the ZNKR. It's actually the most practiced style in Japan.
Right, but it also gets a bit of flack, you know? Some purists see it as too modern, maybe lacking that deep historical root.
Exactly, and that's what this deep dive is all about. We want to unpack how Seitei Iai came to be. It's this paradox, a modern system built by old masters using ancient techniques.
So our mission is to explore its origins, understand the criticisms why some people see weaknesses, but also appreciate its, well, surprising strengths.
Yeah, its cultural and maybe even political importance. How this standardized form became a crucial bridge, connecting these really old traditions to our fast-paced, modern world.
Okay, so to start, maybe we should define Iai itself.
Yeah.
What is it, fundamentally?
Good point. At its core, Iai is about drawing the sword and responding to an attack cutting, defending all in one single fluid motion.
And it's important to differentiate it from Kenjutsu. Kenjutsu is about using the sword after it's already out of the scabbard.
Is that distinction super critical, though? To someone watching, drawing, and cutting might seem like part of the same thing?
Oh, it's absolutely critical,
Yeah.
because it defines the why and the when. Classical training, you see, always included both. They were necessities.
Oh, okay.
And the sources suggest Iai really developed out of battlefield necessity. Think Nora, high-end periods.
Right.
Samurai often had long weapons like spears or naginata, especially on horseback. What happens if that breaks?
You need something fast for close quarters, the sword or dagger.
Exactly. It wasn't about a formal duel starting. It was about sudden, unexpected threats when your primary weapon was gone or useless. Instant defense.
So pure survival instinct driving the technique.
Precisely. That need for speed, for reacting immediately, led to all these terms for fast-drawing techniques. Nuki-ai, Sai-no-uchi, Barojutsu, different names, same idea.
The fight starts the second your hand hits the sword hilt.
That's the principle. Now, if you talk Iai history, one name always comes up. Hayashizaki Junsuke Shigenobu, late 1500s.
The father of Iai, right. That's the common label.
It is, and there's this great legend about him discovering his techniques during his shugyo, a really intense period of spiritual training before avenging his father. It's a powerful story.
Makes for a good origin myth, but like a lot of myths, historical research adds some layers, doesn't it? He wasn't the very first.
That's right. We know older schools, older ryu like Tenshin Shoden Katori Shinto Ryu and Takenouchi Ryu already had similar quick-draw techniques in their curriculum.
So if he didn't invent it from scratch, why is he still such a pivotal figure? Why Hayashizaki?
Because he seems to have been the great systematizer, the greatest exponent, as one source puts it. He traveled a lot, taught widely.
Spreading the art.
Yes, and inspiring so many other schools that branched off from his teachings. Crucially, his lineage is the one that leads directly to the major styles we see today, like Muso Shinden Ryu and Muso Jikiden Aishin Ryu.
So his legacy wasn't necessarily invention, but transmission and evolution. He ensured it survived.
Exactly. He built the trunk of the tree, in a way. And that brings us forward into the 20th century and another huge name, Nakayama Hakudo.
Hakudo, often called Kensei, the saint of the sword. That's quite a title.
It really is. Shows the immense respect he commanded. He was a master of various Budo, studied Aishin Ryu deeply in Tosa, and then in 1934, he formalized his own interpretation, Muso Shinden Ryu.
That feels like a key moment, taking Ai firmly into the modern dojo setting.
It was. But then, of course, World War II happened, and the occupation afterwards.
Right, the ban on martial arts. That must have been a disaster for arts like Ai that depends so heavily on direct personal transmission.
It was a very difficult time. But when the ban was finally lifted in 1953, things changed dramatically. I got kind of absorbed by the Zen Nihon Kendo Renmei of the ZNKR.
The big kendo organization.
Yes, and they had this whole established system for kendo administration ranking.
And they just applied that structure directly onto IIO.
Yeah.
Ranks like Shodan up to Judan, teaching titles like Renshi, Kyoshi, Hanshi.
Exactly. And that's where the crisis really hit. The reason Seitei Iai had to be created.
Okay, let's unpack that crisis. What were the big hurdles?
Well, the first massive one was grading. How could a panel of judges possibly standardize ranks?
Right. If you've got one person doing a kata, say, from Hokkyu, and another doing one from Muso Jikiden Aishinryu,
Yeah.
they look completely different, don't they?
Totally different. Different stances, different tempos, different principles of movement, different targets even. A Hokkyu kata might be low, powerful, grounded. An Aishinryu kata might be lighter, faster, more flowing.
So comparing them apples to apples for a specific rank, like Sandan, it's impossible.
It was objectively impossible. There was no common standard, no shared baseline. It made the whole ZNKR ranking system for II seem arbitrary, almost meaningless.
A bureaucratic nightmare on top of a technical one. Okay, so grading incompatibility was hurdle number 1. What was the second?
The second was simply the pace of modern life. Kendo was booming after the war. Lots of Kendo people wanted to learn a Yu to understand the sword itself.
But the classical schools, the Koryu,
Yeah.
they demand incredible time commitment, right? Decades, sometimes.
Decades. Slow, meticulous study under a master. And modern students, university students, people with jobs, they just didn't have that kind of time to dedicate solely to one ancient II school.
They needed a more accessible entry point.
Exactly. Something foundational, relatively simple to grasp that could give them the essence of II within the structure of modern Budo training. A system for, as the sources say, a hurried world.
Okay, so you have this grading mess, and you have the need for a faster introductory path. But creating a quick start II, wasn't that seen as just watering down the real thing? Did the old masters want this?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think many felt they were sacrificing something profound. But the alternative, well, it looked like institutional extinction for many schools, or just fading into tiny, isolated pockets.
What other options were there?
The only other real option was what the sources call unthinkable.
Mm-hmm.
The ZNKR could have just picked one classical school, say, Muso Jikiden Aishinryu, and declared it the official standard for everyone.
Oof. I can imagine how that would go down.
Small laugh. Yeah. Political suicide. You had all these proud, powerful, ancient schools with deep lineages, forcing them all to adopt the methods of one rival school.
It would have caused outrage, maybe even a complete split.
Absolutely. One source mentions it would have provoked the anger of all the other I masters. No, imposition wasn't feasible. The only path forward was compromise, collaboration.
Okay, so this leads to the creation committee. 12 major II masters tasked by the ZNKR to build this new standardized set, the Seitei Gata.
12 of the most respected figures in the country. And their task was immense. They had to essentially take core techniques from their own traditions they'd sworn to uphold, and blend them.
That must have required incredible flexibility, maybe even swallowing some pride.
Immense flexibility. They met at the Budokan in Tokyo, ironing out tiny details, accommodating different philosophies, changing movements, approving things that went against their own school's specific way.
Let's use an example to make it concrete. The very first kata, the Ponmi or Mei. How do they handle the conflicting ways to do the opening draw and overhead raise, the forikaburi?
Right, the forikaburi bringing the sword up over the head for the cut. You had major differences there.
Like between omori-ri and aishinryu.
Exactly. Omori-ryu, known for wider, maybe more graceful movements, had this distinctive motion where the sword tip makes a kind of wave around the left shoulder as it comes up.
Okay, I can picture that. Almost ornamental.
And then Aishinryu used a much more direct vertical lift called Suri-age. Think of pulling up a fishing line straight up. Very efficient, very direct.
Two totally different feelings, both with centuries of history. So how did the committee bridge that gap? What was the compromise for Seitei Iai's Maikata?
The solution was elegant, really. A middle path. They decided the sword should pass close to the left ear during the furikaburi.
Ah, so not the wide omori wave, but not the super tight vertical Aishin lift either.
Precisely. It captured the feeling of raising the sword strongly, drawing on elements perhaps from both, but without adopting the unique defining characteristic of either school exclusively. It was a negotiated movement.
Wow. When you frame it like that, you really appreciate the sheer amount of letting go these masters had to do, setting aside deeply ingrained techniques for the sake of something new, something communal.
It was a huge political and technical achievement, and it happened relatively quickly. The first 7 Seitei Iai kata were presented in May 1969 at the Kyoto Taikai Festival.
And we can trace their DNA, right? Like Mary and Ushiro drawing from Omori-ryu, Kesagiri from Hokkyu-ryu.
Yes, they were constructed from these components, but designed to work together as a coherent introductory set, a foundation.
But it wasn't set in stone then, was it? The system kept evolving.
That's crucial. It shows the ZNKR saw it as an educational tool, not a historical monument. In 1981, they added 3 more kata, bringing the total to 10.
Pulling in more advanced concepts.
Exactly. Techniques like Ganmen Eite, which comes from the Oku Iai, the inner or hidden teachings of Muso Shindenru, they were layering complexity onto the established base.
And it's still changing, which probably drives some traditionalists nuts. They recently added an 11th and 12th kata, so giri and nukiuchi.
It demonstrates that Seitei Iai is viewed by the ZNKR as a living curriculum, adaptable to teaching needs and the ongoing development of Iai practice within their system.
Which brings us to the legacy and the criticism. We have to acknowledge the purists' argument. Seitei Iai is a 20th century invention. It lacks the direct, unbroken lineage and arguably the battlefield realism of the classical ryu.
And that's a valid point if your primary metrics are historical purity or pure combat application. But if you look at the bigger picture, the ZNKR's goal and its success wasn't necessarily creating a better fighting art.
It was about survival and accessibility.
Survival, accessibility, and organizational coherence. It essentially created a common language.
A lexicon. So all these different schools could finally communicate and be judged under one roof?
Precisely. Seitei Iai made the art explode in popularity. Thousands practice it now. It allowed these diverse, sometimes competing classical traditions to coexist and function within the ZNKR framework. It enabled consistent grading and wider instruction.
So the real intention wasn't to replace the old ways, but to create a standardized on-ramp, a shared foundation for all Budo students, especially those doing Kendo.
Yes. Choosing that path of compromise, rather than trying to force one school's doctrine on everyone, ensured Iai didn't just survive, but thrived in the modern era in a way the isolated classical schools likely couldn't have managed alone.
It's quite the paradox, isn't it? This new system, the most common one in Japan, owes its existence entirely to old masters being willing to bend on centuries of tradition.
Their willingness to compromise, to set aside deeply held opinions for the perceived greater good of the art's future, was the key. The strength of modern Iai came from that adaptability, even at the cost of some historical authenticity.
So that leaves us with something for you, the listener, to think about. If standardization, like we saw with Seitei Iai, is sometimes the price an art pays for popularity and survival in our fast-moving world, what elements of authenticity are practitioners willing to continuously negotiate or sacrifice?
Or maybe, looking at how Seitei Iai was born, perhaps that very ability to adapt, to collaborate, and yes, even to compromise on technical purity, maybe that itself is the most vital secret to the long-term survival and relevance of Budo traditions.
Thank you for listening to this podcast.
Kendo Iai do Italia, il podcast.